don't know about you guys, but that salad was awesome. So totally awesome. Welcome to the Innovation in DEI Past, Present, and Future workshop for this afternoon. I'm Andrena Powell-Baker with Pacolet Milliken, and I'm delighted to be your moderator for this afternoon. And before I introduce Jared, I want to just give you a couple of points about the session this afternoon. The first 45 minutes will be facilitated by Jared using a framework called Think, Interact, and Act. And then the last 15 minutes is a little bit different. Most of these sessions end with a Q&A. But for this afternoon session, Jared will facilitate kind of a report out from the exercises that you do during the 45 minutes. And then the last 15 minutes will also include a Q&A in the midst of all of that. So Jared, if you're ready, I'll go ahead and introduce you and tell these folks a little bit about you. So Jared Simmons is the founder and principal of Outlast Consulting. It's an Atlanta-based company, and it helps companies bring an innovation mindset to their challenging business problems, which we all face on a daily basis. Before that, he was with Coca-Cola down in Atlanta in the innovation arena. And he was part of the product development and innovation practice at McKinsey & Company as well. He's a chemical engineer by training. That's a little scary, but we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt this afternoon. He told me when we were speaking on last Friday that he's not a DEI expert, but he's an innovation expert. So I think that's a great way to kind of describe himself. He was also with Procter & Gamble in the research and development area, and he held many roles in marketing, supplier management, and product development. Jared is the host of What is Innovation, which is a podcast, and he's a certified executive coach, moderator, and practitioner of various personality assessment tools. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jared, and enjoy.
How's everyone?
Good. Excellent.
Good. Sorry, that was hard to endure for an introvert, so for that introduction. My name is Jared Simmons. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. Okay, perfect. So as I just said, I am an introvert. I prefer conversation to presentation, so if you all will help out with that, that'd be great. We'll go through the framework, and we'll talk about what it means to think about DEI through an innovation lens. A lot of times today, people, when they think about innovation, they think about technology. And innovation really is a new way of thinking and a new way of solving problems. And sometimes that involves technology, sometimes it involves new tools, new approaches, new frameworks, new methodologies. But when you think about a problem as complex and big and pervasive and as old as diversity at work, I can't think of a better application for diversity. So we'll get started with a quick description of the framework. So think, interact, act. So I love simple things, and I was trained in multiple places that 3 is the right number for things like this. So that's why you've got 3 things going on here. Think is really about solidifying your point of view on a problem. So it doesn't involve other people. It can involve other resources and information, but this is a step sometimes in more socially oriented problems we tend to skip over. Let's get everybody in a room. Let's get everyone together. That is an important step. That's that interaction step. But before that, it's important to shape your mind around what you think about the problem, what your point of view is on it, because once you move out from thinking to interacting, you're going to be influenced by what you hear and see. So focusing on that think step, the 2 key pieces in that step are what and why. So what do you want to accomplish? and why do you want to accomplish it? So keeping those problems and questions very simple, because this is such a complex challenge, keeping the questions very simple is super important. Then as you think about the types of problems that there are individual problems and organizational problems. A lot of times when we get into the mode of thinking about DEI or diversity, we jump right into thinking about people, because people are at the heart of it. But organizations are entities too, and a problem that affects a group of people at an entity is an organizational problem. It's not an individual problem. So, if women or people of color or a group are having an issue, those people are individual. I have two brothers. We grew up in the same house, ate the same food, went to the same university. We are three very different human beings. And so when you have these group problems, they are organizational problems. They're not individual problems. They require organizational solutions, not individual solutions. So that's the first thing you want to do when you start thinking about this is, am I thinking about an organizational problem or am I thinking about an individual problem? Now, when you think about me in an organization, as a member of an underrepresented group, thinking about how to help me advance in my career, that's an individual problem. That's an individual challenge. So that comes back to my skills, my background, my experiences, things that I use to do my work. So when you think about supporting an individual, you want to think about what tools they use to get their work done, to achieve and accomplish and advance things at work. When you think about the organization, that's when you start thinking about sort of the broader questions. And a lot of times we sort of mix those up and start treating individuals with labels and treating organizations in ways that are that have them come across as more unique than they actually are. Organizations are much more similar than people are. So the first exercise we're going to do is work on a problem statement. And so Clayton Christensen, I don't know if you are familiar with his work and the organization he founded, but he came up with a phrase called the job to be done. And his concept was that every product, every service is being hired by a consumer to solve a problem. And so what is the job that it's being hired to do? And so if you think about your work, where you sit in the space of DEI, your organization, or as a consultant, or wherever you are, if you think about one problem that you're trying to solve, you would like to solve for your organization, what is that one problem? So take a stab at that. The next step, so you can kind of differentiate, the next step is we'll talk about goals and metrics. So this should be in the form of a sentence in terms of what you're trying, what you would like to accomplish for the organization, what problem you would like to solve. Does that make sense? Okay, I'll give you a minute. I also brought a bunch of my favorite template, which is blank white paper, if anybody wants a clean slate to write on. There you go. Thank you. Anyone else? No problem. Okay, maybe two quick examples or two quick things from the group. Anybody want to share? Yes.
Increase retention of diverse employees.
Increase retention of diverse employees. Got it. Okay. Who else? Yes.
Increase the number of diverse leaders.
Increase the number of diverse leaders. Okay. Good ones. So, so these are great. There's a couple of frameworks you can think about jobs to be done through. The one thing I would say is when you're thinking about think about words before you think about numbers. So words like retain, diverse, employees and leaders, these words would need definition before you can count them, right? So these are probably 2 levels away from being to a point where you could write a crisp goal or metric around them. But it's a great place to start. Because first you need to define what is diverse, what's an employee, that's relatively easy, and then what is a leader. And then you can come back and start to work on the numbers. But these are great starting points. These are organizational. These fit in that organizational bucket, right? Did anybody take a stab at anything in the individual bucket? That one's tougher. We'll skip over that one. You can think about that one later. Okay, so I think this is a great example. But just the things to do with these types of jobs to be done are to define them, and then as we move into metrics and goals, we're going to time bound them, and we're going to put numbers around them. So that's the next step. So take a second, and based on this conversation, if you need to clarify anything in your problem statement, do that, and then we'll move into metrics and goals. And I'll just give you a couple of my I won't call them pet peeves, but a couple of things I always watch out for in this space when it comes to innovation. DEI, more than other areas, focuses a lot on percentages. And percentages are very, very tricky numbers to use as metrics because they're 2 numbers. They're a numerator and a denominator. And so if a percentage goes up, did the numerator go up or did the denominator go down? You don't know. You just know there's a higher percentage. So it can give you a false indication of progress, or it could underreport progress. So anyway, think about that. Take a stab at some metrics, and then we'll keep talking. Can you hear me okay? You still can't hear me? Okay. Okay. Who wants to talk about their goals and their metrics? Yes.
Increase the number of HBCU student members in our society
Mm-hmm.
by 10 by the end of 2024.
By 10. The number. Okay, so you're increasing the number of students by 10 by 2024. Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, exactly. So that's great. So good example of this is people talk about John F. Kennedy's, challenge to the nation to put a person on the moon by the end of the decade. And everyone was so worried about 1969, but the decade actually ends in 1970. So when you say that by a year, Do you mean December 31st, 2023? Do you mean December 31st, 2024? And you already commented on that, but that's a great example of, this is a great example of a fully formed goal metric that you can roll up and that you can measure. Then this you can decide what frequency you want to do this on. So, and that gives you the chance to talk about tracking.
And you set a goal for like the one above that, right? For something that requires turnover or availability in certain spots, how would you goal set for something that's a little more difficult?
How would you goal set for something that's a bit more difficult? So I think there's difficult to achieve and difficult to measure. And so I think this is probably difficult to, you're saying difficult to achieve is what you're saying, what you're talking about. I think when you think about this number, it depends on the size of your organization. So you want to roll it up to the point where one or two people don't move the number so dramatically, or you want to check it on a frequency where the numbers don't move dramatically. So you're fighting noise when you're reporting on something like this. And the two ways to fight noise are to increase your sample size, so roll everybody up, or check more often and average it, or check less often and be comfortable with the periods in between. That requires, when we jump to interact, we'll talk about what that requires, which is a very good story about why you're only checking once a year or once a quarter or whatever. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yes.
I use the second one just as an example,
Mhm.
increase the number of diverse leaders. So I wrote hire or promote two by end of first quarter 2024.
Hire or promote two by end of first quarter 2024. That's great. That's great. And so that's a number, that's a hiring number. It's not a net presence number, right? So that's just how you have to communicate it, is our focus is on hiring. It's not on the net number.
That's why I put promoting there too, because when you're leaders, they could be at a lower level and you increase, so you still increase them if they're promoted.
Right. No, that's also true. But, I've quit 3 very good jobs. So, you can do your best work, and, it's down to this individual problem, right? So I like the focus on hiring because that's in your sphere of control. You're bringing people in, you're telling the right story, you're building the right environment and culture for them to be successful. That's all you can do. You can make dinner and set the table, but you can't make people eat. So I like that it's focused on hiring and promotion, and because that net number can sometimes be discouraging if someone with more resources or a different industry or a different job or whatever comes into someone's selection set, you can't control that. Any other examples you want to share? All right, I'm gonna keep going. This is usually like a 3 or 4 hour workshop. We're gonna get through it. All right. So interact. This is kind of the unique portion of this this framework. This one focuses mostly on who and when. So it's really about seeing the problem from a different point of view. So if you spent the time thinking about it, in your own head, now you're going out into the world to gather more context around this problem. Here's the way I see it. How do you see it? Here's the way I see it. What am I missing? Those sorts of things. So conferences are a great example of interaction opportunities. When you have a problem statement in mind, so you've got something in mind around hiring diverse leaders, or around promoting folks, or things like that. When you meet a new person, you've got context to have the conversation in. So, I work in DEI in this space, or I'm a DEI consultant in this space, is different from, this is who I am, this is where I work, and right now I'm focused on trying to, on hiring, this many folks in this period of time, that triggers a different thought in my head in terms of connecting you to someone else, or giving you advice on, oh, we tried to do that last year, or we're working on the same thing, let's collaborate. So this interaction step is important because to build on your problem statement and think through how you can leverage meeting people to clarify your problem statement. It's also the step where you start to influence, thinking about how to influence and persuade others to see the problem your way. So there's an internal focus of, am I thinking about this right? What have I missed? And there's an external focus of how can I help other people see it this way so that I can influence and persuade. Does that make sense? So this step is something we tend to call stakeholder management. And so at this step, what we'll do as an exercise is make a list of 3 people that you would want to connect with or collaborate with or speak with on the subject of the problem statement that you just wrote. So there may be people in your organization, could be a type of person that you'd like to meet here. But just 3 people in the context of just the problem statement that you've written, 3 people that could be helpful to interact with. Does that make sense? It doesn't have to be names, could be titles, roles, anything like that. Questions?
Just keeping it
Yes.
internal.
No, they don't have to be internal, could be, but if they're not internal, it could just be someone that, I'd like to speak to someone who's an expert in hiring, a consultant in, diverse hiring, something like that.
In light of what you said just a second ago about someone with a different lens, is that the 3 people that you're talking about? Like, you're looking for someone with those different lenses instead of, because I could pick 3 people out of the air.
Of course, yeah, you could.
Specifically go after people with a different lens than you. Is that what?
Specifically, I would go after people who can help you with your problem statement.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
You said this was stakeholder
Management.
management.
And keep in mind the different types of interactions. It could be internally focused, how do I sharpen my pencil on my problem, or externally focused, how do I persuade people? So it could be someone you want to meet to tell them about what you're trying to work on to persuade them to help. Okay, who's ready to share?
My who's would be our current HR director.
Current HR director,
Obviously our chief people officer,
chief people officer,
2 people, and then our VP of L&D, so our learning development.
VP of Learning and Development. Okay.
Those are kind of people that have been my people along the way.
Right. And those are the people that would have the authority and the resources to help. Would you mind sharing your problem statement?
Oh, so mine was to create a mentorship program for people looking like me by the end of core 2. And all along that is kind of identify that 1 to 2 people.
Got it. Create a mentorship program for people that look like you by the
End of Q2.
end of Q2. The calendar year Q2? Like,
Yes.
okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, okay. All right. Okay. Very nice. Yeah, no, that's great. So, now this room, everyone in this room knows that you're thinking about that problem. You've got 3 people that you've listed that make perfect sense in terms of how to build that internally. And maybe there's someone in the room who's had some experience with that, or could give you some perspective on how to move that forward. That's a great example. It's a good list. There you go. All right, what else? Yes.
Actually, we reverted to the first 2 questions in the last one. Increase retention and
Increase retention and increase number of diverse leaders were your problem statement.
I would speak to the diversity person at your local colleges, see what they're experiencing. It's also to get them, it also helps them with education as well.
Okay.
What you are looking for at your company,
Mm-hmm.
and how they can bridge that gap.
Mm-hmm.
The chief executive officer, he has to be on board with everything you want to move forward.
So you said local community colleges and the CEO. Okay, yeah.
And also the chief diversity officer.
And the chief diversity officer. Right, okay. And so in that list, that's a great list. You could just make up a title or position for the person at the community college that you'd be looking for. So would you be looking for, an external, some colleges have externally focused roles and things like that, that you could look for so that you have a specific person to kind of go look for, but those make a lot of sense. Yeah. Any others? All right. So, excuse me, sorry about that. So stakeholder management, like I said, we're doing kind of a speed version of this, but the critical thing about stakeholder management is that it is as important as any other step in the change management process. And when you get that group of people right, and you get the message right to that group of folks, it makes everything else easier. And so it's often underestimated, we often kind of speed through it. I want to get this thing done, so I'm going to get this team in a room and we'll keep moving. But spend some time thinking about, do we have the right people thinking about the problem? Are the right people aware of this problem? And if a question I ask myself is, I think of a person that's very different from me and ask myself, who would they put in the room to solve this problem? Because we all have tendencies, silos, that we get into. And so it's critical to break out of that in this step. All right, the next step is act. And each step kind of has its own sort of watch outs. So, the think step is great, but it's easy to mistake learning for thinking. And so that's the watch out for that think step where, you're gathering information, but you're not necessarily spending time digesting it and applying it to your problem. The interact step, the challenge is the illusion of progress. So you can go to conferences, you can have meetings, you can do all these things, and they are important for context or for building a team, but they don't move the needle on solving the problem directly. Sorry if that said the quiet part out loud, but it's important. These are critical things. These conferences, these interactions are critical, but we have to make sure that we don't mistake them for progress on solving the problem. They are a building block, but they are not the solution. And so, yes?
Will you say watch out thing?
Oh, it's mistaking learning for thinking. So we get a lot of book recommendations from people on things, especially in the DEI space. And it's important to read the books. It's also important to take time to think through what you read, what you learned, digest it. I'd rather read one book 3 times than 5 books, 5 different books. So it's important to really take in what you're reading. So this act step, the watch out here is a bias toward activity over progress. And what I mean by that is you can do things, you can be in motion, but not necessarily be making progress. And a lot of times when we're trying to hold on to a job, justify funding, et cetera, it's what can we do to show that we're busy versus what can we do to show progress. And those are 2 different things. And it's an important distinction to make because I think it's at the root of burnout. Because we're out doing things, staying active, being and doing things, but they're not what looks like progress to the people that are setting budgets or determining priorities. And so taking the time in that interact step to talk to the right folks about what progress looks like to them will set your act step up to be more impactful and I think less of a drain, because you know you're doing the things that, one, solve the problem, and two, look like solving the problem to the people that matter. Yes. Oh, questions? Thoughts? Yes.
When does data come into the conversation? Is that when you're doing the what part? So you're getting that before you're moving into interacting and helping influence and persuade others?
Yeah. So the question was, when does data come into the conversation? And it comes into the conversation as a tool. So it should answer a question that you need to answer, or it should demonstrate a point that you need to demonstrate. So in the interact step, you would go pull data for a point you're trying to make to influence someone. Or in the think step, you might come across some data or some information that makes you think about something differently that you'll then dig a little deeper into. But it's easy to, so the short answer to your question is, it's the ornaments, it's not the tree. So you'll know when you need a number to make a point, and then you go find the number, versus having a data set that someone collected or wrote a paper on or whatever, and then trying to fit that to. And now there's so many AI tools and other tools that you can now really start with your story and then go do the research rapidly to get just the right data points, vetted data points, to support your story versus having to read 8 research papers to find the one item. Does that make sense? Other questions? Okay, this act step is simple. We're just gonna write down 2 things that you're gonna go do when you walk out of the room that will make progress on the problem statement that you wrote. Any questions on that? All right, perfect. And the two important questions here are how and where. Because these relate to resources. So the act step is all about resources and focus and progress. Do it? Oh, no problem. Questions? Yes.
Can you say more about the 2 things? The 2 things that will make progress? Like, is it within the timeline that you set when you did the interaction? Or is it,
Yeah.
what's the timeline?
So these aren't linear steps. We're going through them because we have to talk about them in an order. But if you are making a plan in your act step and you know this is the right next step, but it doesn't line up with your problem statement, it might mean you need to revisit your problem statement and see if you might need to write it a little differently. So they're all you kind of go back and forth amongst all 3. Yeah. Any questions? Like I said, this is a 3 or 4 hour workshop you all just went through. So, anyone want to share their actions? Yeah.
Going back to the HBCU one,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say the one in interact, but my actions are to identify the individual career center contacts for each of the HBCUs
Yep. Perfect. Yep. Because that'll make progress toward moving that number. So the act steps either move the number or they make progress towards that. And that can be in resource allocation, or it can also be in direct action. Other examples? Anyone else?
Send out a team.
What was that?
Send out a team's meeting request.
Send out a Teams meeting request. I love it. Yep. To the right people that you identified in the interact step, right? Yeah. There you go. So that's kind of how it works in just a quick rapid version, but focusing on those basic questions. When you're thinking what and why, interact, who and when, act, how and where. Those basic questions will get you a long way down the path of thinking things through. Now you've got a problem statement, you've got a clear set of people you want to talk to about it, and you've got some action steps to move forward. And there's no AI, there's no, I need a new app, I need a new, workflow, I need anything like that. So technology is an enabler to innovation, but it's not innovation in and of itself. So if you've got a white piece of paper in 15 minutes, you can move your problem forward. So this is hard work, it's draining work, it's long work, it's generational work. And so it's important to be able to craft these crisp problem statements so you can see progress. Because as someone said earlier today, it can feel like things aren't moving. They won't move as fast as we want them to, but that doesn't mean they're not moving. And so going through this process, in addition to kind of helping you crystallize your thinking and communicate differently, can also sort of safeguard you against some of the elements that lead to burnout, frustration, and all those other things.
Jared, I think it's very important to be very intentional about the things that you do, even in your reflecting over what you've already done. And if it didn't work then, sometimes you just got to understand where you're trying to really get to.
That's right.
And understand, and when you continuously or continue to improve
Right.
what you're doing.
Right.
And is monitored, you can gauge.
Right.
If you're making progress.
That's right.
It's important.
That's
to
right.
have support behind you.
Right. Yeah, no, the support comes when you can monitor and communicate that progress, right? It really makes it easier to get that support, which makes it easier to make progress, which makes it easier to get more support. So no, you're exactly right. It's critical. And a lot of times what gets identified I'm also a coach, and people reach out to me to work with people who they say have a communication problem, but they don't have a communication problem, they just haven't clearly organized their thoughts. So you can be as articulate as you want to be, but if you haven't taken the time to think through, these are the 3 points I want to make, this is what I'm trying to get across, this is the audience I'm speaking to. If you don't factor those things in, no amount of Toastmasters or whatever else is going to make you a clear communicator. So that's the other key piece of this process is you will feel more confident and more effective as a communicator if you already know, here's my problem statement, these are the people I'm talking to, and this is what I know about what their goals are, and these are the steps that I think I'm going to go take next. Yes?
Remember you were talking a lot about identifying stakeholders and kind of the who. I know that you didn't mention, but it's super relevant, at least in most of the things that I do in my nonprofit, about who's the messenger to those stakeholders. And so I just wanted to see if you had any thoughts kind of on whenever you're mapping out the stakeholder engagement, like how you think about who the right messenger is.
Yes. So the question was thoughts on mapping out stakeholders and engagement and the approach to that. It's super important. There's so many aspects to it. I think the main way I think about it is is people, processes, and tools. And what folks give me access to those things if I need people, if I need processes, if I need tools, who are the folks that I need to go to for those things? And then I think personality type is very important in that interact step if you're going to ask for things or if you're trying to communicate your problem. So I tend to try to have some sort of interaction with folks so I can gauge whether they are, a top-down thinker, are they, kind of a big picture person, are they a detailed person, are they a person who wants to talk about it, are they a person that just wants you to send them the information? So that comes into the stakeholder engagement map as well. And then the third piece is how bought in they are to what you're trying to do. And so just because they're the head of HR doesn't mean they're bought into the problem statement you just wrote down. So that's where what you were talking about, okay, now if they're not bought in, who do they listen to? Who's a person that can influence that person? And can I have a conversation with that person to understand either one, how to be more effective as a communicator directly with that person, or to get that person in the boat and have them then shepherd the message. So it's a bit of a dance, but it has all those kind of elements to it. Does that make sense? To answer your question?
Jared, you need to know who you're inviting to your party.
Yes, you need to know who you're inviting to your party. That's right. That's right. You need to know that. That's right. That's a great way of putting it. So you have to know who you're talking to, and you have to know what their priorities are. So getting your head wrapped around what you think is important is important first, but then in that interact step, if we had another half hour, we could go deep into that. But it's really about understanding, meeting them where they are from a personality type standpoint, also from their priorities. So your priority 1 might be their priority 3. And so you have to think about, I'm coming in with this mismatch. Now, how do I close that gap? And do I need to close that gap, or do they have so many resources that I don't need to convince them this is the most important thing? I just need to chunk my ask down so small that they can do it and not have to worry about it. Other questions? Yes.
So this is kind of along those lines, but more specifically to the comment you made about illusion of progress.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking to maybe an audience that has been so passionate about what they've done and they've poured their hearts out to this, but if the illusion of progress is there, can you maybe give some tips about how to navigate those type of situations?
Yeah. So that's a great one. The question was about when folks have put their time and blood, sweat, and tears into things that are more of an interact sort of thing than an act sort of thing, and they've kind of bought into the illusion of that being progress. How do you address that? And I think this framework gives you the opportunity to do that. So you can point out the benefits that come from the interact step. Okay, we've done these things, and so now that means we understand X, Y, and Z. So now this will set us up well to go do these other things, that the act, there's more progress driving things, because doesn't necessarily have to be throwaway effort. It's just not progress to solving the problem. It's help. And you can still be grateful for it, but then it's important to get them onto kind of what progress looks like and that next step. And they may not be the right folks they may have burned themselves out on that step. And so your challenge might be, okay, now they've done this important work for gathering this context. Who can I engage, understanding that where they are from an energy standpoint? Who can I engage to kind of move this forward? Does that answer your question?
How would you compare this to like creating SMART goals, specifically in individually and organizationally?
Yep. Yeah, SMART goals to me are a format for the think step. So you just plug it into that. So the goal is for pretty much everything, smart, lean, all the things. There's a home for them in here. Yeah. I think I'm okay. Yeah, it's time for us to wrap up. Hope this was helpful. Oh, good. Good. Some good books. Yeah, I can give you a few. I'll give it some thought based on what you tell me. What was that? What was that? 501. There you go. There you go. There you go. The long version. So this is my consulting firm's tool. We do 2-hour workshops, half-day workshops for small businesses, nonprofits, Fortune 500s. So it's just kind of how we work.